Welcome to Soft Bites Podcast. Your life, your dentistry. We talk about ways to have more fun and meaning in one of the coolest and most rewarding professions in medicine. Conversations on how to bring awareness, create a healthy workplace, and provide emotional insights to make dentistry a fulfilling activity while making space for one's wonder, creativity, and freedom. Here are your hosts, Manuela and Jorge André.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Soft Bites podcast. Hello, Jorge André. How are you?
How are you, Manuela? Nice to see you again. I know that you're in Portugal recording, right?
Yes. I came home to see my parents and to spend a couple of days here. The good weather. It's still hot here.
Yes, it is. It's raining, but it's still hot. And but the month of October was amazing. It was really amazing. It was strangely hot. But it was very good. It was very good.
So I have made you a challenge for us to talk today about your research article, because you had a very important research article that was published recently in the International Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry. Congratulations for that, first of all. So it's a 3-part article. So part 1 and 2 are out. If I'm not mistaken, part 2 was just recently out.
A few days ago, yeah.
Yeah, and part 3 is coming out in 3 months, maybe?
In January 24.
So my proposition here is for us to dive in your personal process of writing a research article, because I can imagine this is a lot of work, and I think it will be interesting to know the process. So, first of all, and I want to know if you can explain what exactly your article is about and its contribution to the evidence-based dentistry. So we are going to talk more, and sorry to interrupt you before you start speaking. My goal here is for us to dive more in the process of making it. But I think this, of course, to start, for you to explain what exactly is your article about and what you want to bring to dentistry with it.
Well, thanks for you insisted on this. I had no idea about talking about this. It's always strange for me to excessively promote the work, let's say it. But I completely understand that. Honestly, I think that for other people listening that eventually wonder how they should start if they want to do some sort of contribution to, like, writing an article or something. So thank you for insisting on that, and I think I have some interesting insights. I think, well, at least for me, that I'm going to talk about the things that work for me. So first of all, regarding the article, I've always been drawn to writing articles. Actually, that was I've said this many times. That was the main reason why I opened my practice, because I wanted to write articles. I just knew that I had something. I can't explain it why, but I just knew I had something worth saying. That's it. I cannot explain that, but I just always felt that it was never something that I felt about it, that I thought about it. I've always felt that. I felt that was something that was natural for me, and I don't ask me exactly how or why, but I always felt that. And in the beginning of when I recently graduated, I did my first serious research with some CAD/CAM systems that we had at the dental school, in Porto Dental School. And it was my first real research article about, basically we develop a mathematical formula that would be more objective in providing grades to the students' preparations, because we could, with CAD/CAM, we could objectify exactly the parameters and the angles. And we published that first research article was on the European Journal of Dental Education, and that was true. That was true research. I mean, we did a formula. We had 20 preparations. We analyzed them. We did a good statistical analysis of that, and that was real research, let's say. But then, but I am a clinician, right? I like to deal with people. I like to work with people, with patients. And I've always wanted to bring out something in the same way that I would do the research to publish. I always thought that I would like to bring out something. And that was the reason why I opened my practice, because there was a lot of publication of clinical cases. And dentistry is there's a lot of how do you say it? Of course, that you have the real research articles like lab research, and then you have systematic reviews and meta-analysis and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of clinical techniques that are demonstrated, what people sometimes call clinical research. Okay. So clinical research, when I start to work more with patients, the only option that I had was clinical research. Basically, take photographs or of procedures, or think about decision strategies, clinical decision strategies, and publish them. And that is what I would say maybe a low grade of evidence in terms of publication. I mean, the highest available evidence is, of course, meta-analysis and systematic reviews and stuff like that. Then you have laboratory research. And so narrative reviews and clinical research and clinical cases, they are basically at the lowest level of evidence. But nevertheless, I still believe they are important, because what happens in dentistry, and that happens a lot, which is sometimes some clinicians pushing forward, then the research goes after them. That it happened with immediate loading in implants. It happened with immediate implants, post-extractional implants. It happened with a lot of things in dentistry. So there were some clinicians that would propose a technique, and then research would basically validate them. So basically, they would dare to lead the way. And there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of discussion if clinical cases and clinical research should actually be considered research. I think it should. I think every sort of research has its own place. But there's a lot of controversy. And what happens in the last 10 years was that many magazines, they want like pure research, lab research. But then what happens is that the clinical research is something that has not been so well accepted in the magazines. But like Antonio Mata was saying when he was here with us, there's a lot of lab research that is very well done, but has no clinical use whatsoever, right? And there's also a lot of clinical research that has no interest, because it's not reproducible, you know. So I think that the balance is the best way. We should have good lab research, but we also should give the opportunity to clinicians to present their own research. And in my case, I've always realized that my strongest point was making complex decisions, making them simple. So turning complex decisions into simple, logical, and easy to understand thought processes. We started to write some articles. Me and my team. We started in 2000. I think it was in 9, or my first publication in International Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry, which is like one of the biggest magazines of aesthetic dentistry in the world. At that time I knew I had this goal. I want to publish in the best magazines, the best clinical journals of aesthetic dentistry. And there are basically two. One is the International Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry, which at the time was the European Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry. And the other one was the Journal of Aesthetic and Restorative Dentistry from the US. Those were the best magazines in terms of aesthetic dentistry. So I said to myself, I want to publish on those. And in 2009, I published my first article on the European Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry, which is now the International Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry. And in 2012, in 2008, it was about coexistence of crowns and veneers in the anterior region. So how do you make a veneer, make it look like a crown? How do you make that the crown and the veneer, they look the same in the anterior region? And in 2012, I had like a more daring goal, which is basically propose a thought process about choosing anterior restorations, ceramic restorations for anterior teeth. And it was a very nice article. I think it is one of the best things that I've ever written. It was the concept of restorative volume, which is basically a very simple way of deciding what's the best ceramic for a particular tooth in the anterior region. Then in 2018, I published also, I was the co-author with Rui Negrão of a very nice article about treatment planning, full mouth treatment planning. And it was only about aesthetics. The posterior teeth were never a big passion of mine. But in the course that I give in Sorriso Natural, it was up to me to give the class on posterior teeth, on restoring single unit restorations on posterior teeth. So I started to lecture there, and I lecture there I've been doing that course for many years. And when you lecture, when you are presenting something, you have questions from students, and you also always, when you are doing a presentation to students, you always want it to make logical. You always want to tell a story, right? And it has to be logical, it has to be simple, and it especially needs to, you need to make a difference in their own decisions, right? Because one thing is impressing patients, impressing students. The other thing is teaching, right? Actually making a difference so that they can actually so that they can actually change their decision process and help them with their own patients. And I was always thinking about ways of doing decision protocols in posterior teeth. And it's much more complex than anterior teeth, because the posterior teeth are more complex, basically. And you have to deal with a lot of things. So basically, the thing is that you have one posterior tooth, and it has several degrees of tissue loss. So it can be like a small class 1 cavity, it can be like a root canal treatment with an MOD cavity or whatever. And then you can have like a very destroyed tooth. And then how do you deal with subgingival areas and stuff like that? So basically, we came up with the C.A.R.E.S concept. And C.A.R.E.S means coverage, adhesion, resistance, aesthetics, and subgingival management. It was a very nice word that I came up with. And basically, we go through all the decision process of restoring a posterior single tooth by using those criteria. Where should you do coverage or not? Where should you do adhesion? Where you should do retention? Where you should do an onlay or a crown? How do you deal with subgingival areas, the aesthetic options? And we divided that decision in 3 parts. We divided the first part, which is partial adhesive restorations. The second part is full crowns. And the third part is dealing with subgingival areas. So basically that was the thought process, let's say. And so the article is about that. And it took me 3 to 4 years to write. It took me 3 or 4 years to write. Yes, it started to be like a single article, but then I started to ask some input from some other colleagues, and it turned out to a 3-part article. And I'm very happy with that because, and we'll talk about that later on, I'm sure, because I'm very happy with the result, and I think it made me really happy.
That was my next question. So, first of all, how and when did the idea of this article started? You already explained that, but if your idea in the beginning, because the article has 3 parts, so it's complex, I'm sure it evolved. So if the idea in the beginning is what you end up with, because I'm sure that it's much more complex than the idea that you had in the beginning.
Well, I always, like I told you, I always, when I give a when I give a class to students, especially on like a modular course, it needs to be logic, you know. So you have to tell them a story. They have to trust the story. It needs to be logical. It needs to make sense for them, and it needs to be simple. And you need to provide some simple decision points so that they can do their own decisions. And I've always been very good at that. There are many things I'm not that good, but I'm very, very efficient on that, on thinking about a complex decision problem and just laying it down and just doing like a decision tree that makes sense and that is based on the evidence and it's easy to follow and it's connected to the clinical reality. I've always been good on that because I do a lot of teaching and I think that sharpens that capacity in me because you always, when you teach, it needs to make sense because otherwise they will ask you, they will just confront you. It doesn't make sense, right? So the idea was that I initially I realized two or three or four insights that were very important for the decision making in posteriority. I realized that the depth of the cavity is more important than the width of the remaining walls. I've also realized that you need to have some decision points like intervals of when you should do A or when you should do B or when you should do C. And the criteria that I used, it made sense. It was logic, and I knew that I had something interesting. While I was lecturing, I realized that by thinking about those problems, I had some decision points that were interesting. So basically, where should you do an adhesive restoration or when should you do a crown, just to make it simple. I knew it very, very, very well clear in my mind. And it made sense and it was based on evidence. It was very well supported on that. And of course, that means that it's not only about teaching. You have to do your own research. But when you teach, you are obliged to go and learn new things, right? And I was always very on top of the literature on that because I did a master degree in prosthodontics at King. So I was very well aware of the literature and the classic articles and the progression of the literature in that topic. So the main idea was that I knew I had a solid thought process for posteriority. I knew it. But then during that thought process, some new other ideas came by, like the vertical preparations, for example. That was not something that I was doing. So when we talked about crowns, I only talk about vertical preparations. And that was basically appearing a lot on social media, which is very interesting, right? Because the vertical preparations are a very old thing, but now they resurge again because of a group of clinicians on social media, some of them Portuguese, like Hugo Costa Lapa, like Luis Afonso, like Raul Costa, and the main guy, which I would say would be Ignacio Loy and also Pascal Venuti. In Italy, there was a lot of resurging of the vertical preparations. So during the thought process and during those years when I was thinking about writing an article, that idea came out. So I started doing those, and it was very interesting. And I always try to be as fair as possible when I write articles. And if I think that that idea or that criteria does not belong to me, I always try to incorporate them in the team and ask them to join me in writing the article. So that's what I did. I asked Pascal Venuti and then the Portuguese guys, Costa Lapa, Raul Costa, and Luis Afonso, to come over and also be co-authors of the article. So that was that. So basically, there was like a main idea, but it appeared at the right moment in time because when we incorporated vertical preparations and we published, I think it was one of the first clinical articles that was like in a very well-known journal that would talk about vertical preparation, because there was a lot of controversy from periodontists in the beginning about vertical preparations. So now it is a more accepted topic. It's still controversial, and I think it was the right time to publish something about that. So that was that. Basically, it all comes down from thinking about solving an issue and trying to basically turn a complex situation into a simple thought process that you can teach to someone. And then the natural progression of that is trying to pass what is in my mind in the slides to an article so that it can be written down. But these 3 or 4 years made the article much more mature, much more bulletproof, and it's. I think that it was written very, very carefully. Every sentence is very well supported. Every thought process is very well supported. It's difficult to you may agree with some things or not, but it's very, very well supported in the literature, and I think it's a very well. I think it was probably one of the best things that I've been involved with. Yes.
And tell me, is there any special strategy or analytical approach you use to integrate all the information to make it coherent, to make it I mean, like you said, simple, because if I understood well, what you just said is that, okay, it's 3 parts, but it's not complex. It's the opposite way. It's actually simple. It gives you all the guidelines. It's long, but it gives you all the guidelines. But is there any strategy or analytical approach in order to integrate all the information, because it's a lot of information? So any guidelines for that?
Well, I always, because I lecture so much, I'm very sensitive to the audience capacity of understanding things. And we try, usually we overestimate the capacity of the audience to understand things. I'm not saying that dentists are dumb. I'm saying that you want to make, for every sort of reader, you want to make their life easier in this specific area, which is clinical research. You want to read something that nowadays you can understand and you can apply. So I'm always with that in mind. Always with that in mind. If I have an idea or a thought process that is too complex, it's not well thought of. Because if you can't, there's this saying which is, if you can't explain that to a kid, you don't understand that enough, right? You don't understand enough of that subject. So you need to be, I think that the biggest proof that you actually understand, that you are very well, that you dominate, let's say, a topic, is the capacity to simplify it. And this is really a skill that you develop with hard work and with thinking and spending many hours thinking about stuff. It comes easy to me, but it's not easy because it's been like 20 years of accumulated work, let's say it. But I would say that the main criteria, the main guideline, which is, let's place ourselves in the heads of the reader. I mean, if it was myself, how I would read this, because I think there's always 2 approaches whenever you create something, and this is interesting because even in marketing, it's very interesting. In marketing, people say, and sometimes in business, people say, well, don't do what you think works, do what the audience or do what the market wants. So test, do some testing, and whatever works, then you go there, right? This is very typical in business and in marketing. You do split testing and do a lot of. So don't be so arrogant that you know what people are going to like. This is one approach. The other approach was completely different, which is like what Steve Jobs would do, which is he would launch products that the audience was not even aware that they needed them, like the iPad. No one knew they needed an iPad. I mean, he did not do any market research. He just trusted his own gut. Some people say it was not his idea, but basically he was the one that pushed it, right? And he trusted his gut so much that the market would absorb it because the idea is very good. So what I'm trying to say is that there's not one approach that is better than the other, right? Both approaches can work. And I understand people that are very analytical and they say, well, I think it's much, much better to just do some testing and just do some market research and they just launch a product that is basically what the audience wants. But I also understand, I also find it very magical, the process of creating something absolutely new and completely different and see what it will happen, right? And I always thought that those two processes were completely opposite, but I believe it's probably to dance in between the two. And this is what I like to do. I like to dance in between the fact that I want to create something completely new, and I sometimes I even like to 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 challenge the writing style of science. But I always need to place myself in the feet of the reader and to see if what I am saying is actually interesting for them. Because I'm not doing I'm not painting. This is not art. Let's say this is science. Yes, you can place your own personal touch here and there. You can do some very nice drawing, some design. You can even question some decisions in a more literary way. You can challenge the way that people write by writing some placing some irony and some provocations inside the text, which is something that I like to do, pushing them. But the only reason that I that I don't get canceled by doing that is because the rest of the article is actually very good. So if you have an article that is actually helpful, good, and evidence based, sometimes you can get away with some provocations, irony, and some more artistic style of writing. And this is what I like to do. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not always 100% confident of how the editors are going to receive that. Because the other thing is that the referees and the editors, they will decide if the article is good or not, right? It may be very good, but the magazine may have published a recent article on the same topic, so they don't accept it. And the acceptance or rejection process, like Antonio Mata was telling us, unfortunately is not always very objective. Antonio Mata was telling us that the referees, they are not using a very scientific criteria for accepting or not accepting articles. So there's a lot of things going on at the same time, but I would probably say that number one is to place yourself in the feet of the reader. Number two is to try to give your own personal touch, because that will give you joy. And number three, you will always have to deal with the editor's board and the referee's board, right? And this works for me because I do clinical research, and clinical research is not like lab research, because in lab research you just follow some criteria, and if you have a very good research, it gets published. But in clinical research, there needs to be, I would say, more creativity. The design of the diagrams and the design and the pictures, they need to be very good, because it's clinical, right? And it's especially in aesthetic dentistry. So yes, I would say you have to deal with all these three different forces that are sometimes battling against each other in your head, and you have to be. I always tell people when I start to write articles with them, and at this point in time, I'm in the stage where I want other people to be the main authors, and I'm trying to push some people to be the main authors. And I always tell them, you need to have thick skin, because sometimes editors, they will completely crush your ego. They will completely place you down, because they can. If you have a response from referees that says, we don't accept it at this time, but we may consider if you do this and this and this and these changes. This is a very, very positive response, because 90% of the time is we reject it. So if they open a door, then you have to realize that the battle is now starting. Sometimes it takes 1 year, go back and forth. You correct these things, you add these things, remove these things, and that edition is also good, because my article, in this case, in my article case, the article is better after the editor's revision and the referee suggestions. It is better because I had some flaws there. For example, endocrowns, I was not completely on top of the research on that, because I submitted the article and 2 months after, a new article came out I wasn't aware of that. And the researchers, while they were doing the review, they saw that article and they said, look, you know that what you are saying now, it's not exactly like that because there's this article that says this. So you have to, in those cases, you have to say, well, thank you. That's very good. So let's edit that and let's improve it. So there's a lot of things going on at the same time, and you have to deal with, you have to have thick skin, because in order to do publications, uh, you'll be passing through a lot of tests, right? It's time consuming, and it's and not only the things that depend on yourself, which is already huge, but also the things that it's out of your control.
Actually, my next question, I think that you already answered also a little bit about it. I was going to ask you. I know that it took a lot, about 3 years from the beginning until the publication. I also remember you telling me that you kept your motivation by always staying in touch with it. So every day you would. So my question has to do about that. So how did you maintain your motivation? So that process, I think it's very worthwhile for you to talk about it again. And also, and this is the part that I think that you already answered a little bit, was through all this 3 years, through all this process, what was the most challenging part for you, and why? But you already said that the peer review and the revisions are challenging, but maybe it was not that. So first, how did you maintain your motivation through these 3 years? How you maintain through that daily contact that you once already talked about here in the podcast? And during these 3 years, what was the most challenging part and why?
So I think that the second question has a lot to do with the first one. The most challenging part is actually not the referees. The most challenging part is to sit down and write. Steven Pressfield has that lovely book, the War of Art, right? And he says that writing is not the difficult part. The difficult part is sitting down to write. And I think that book had an amazing influence on me, you know. And it's very interesting, the question, because people see the sexiness of the situation in the glory part when it's published, right? And it's good. It's nice to have your ego soothed, right? Oh, thank you. Every day I have people asking me about the article since the first one came out. People do posts about the article. People do reels about the article. It's very nice. Guys from Mexico that I had no idea. It's so cool. That's very nice, you know. But they forgot that actually there's a lot of work that needs to be done when you don't feel like it. There's a lot of that. And I think that I was always good on that. Since I was a kid, I think that I was always good on that. And I had a big influence from my father. I'm looking back. I think that I remember my father as the 4th grade. He only went to school 4 years. And it's very interesting because a few weeks ago, I'm going to go back to the subject, but a few years ago, we went to his home, to the village where he was born a few years ago, and someone was talking that they met his teacher of when he was studying when he was studying for 4 years. My cousin met her, and she told him that primary school, yeah. And she told him that my father was the best student she ever had, right? And my father is very methodical in the way of he does what needs to be done. And I remember that in for 4 years of my primary school, my father would always study with me. After that, he would not, because he didn't have the capacity to do that. But he would always do the homework with me. And I think that those 4 years taught me a lot about discipline, about being methodic. So it's A, B, C, you do A, B, C. You don't do A, D. Do you understand? Because we are humans and we want to go, instead of A, B, C, we love to do A, BD or ABF, right? And I think it taught me a lot about things that I later on came to realize is that talent is extremely highly overrated. It's mainly and I think that in art also, and we're going to talk about that, but it's mainly um, having the courage to follow through an idea. Because ideas we all have, right? We all have ideas, we all have insights and stuff like that. But how do you actually transform that into something that for other people to see? Like, for example, Picasso would paint and paint and paint and paint and paint. People have no idea of how he developed his technique through such hard work and through so much pain and through so much days that he painted even when he didn't want it to. So I think the talent is highly overrated. So the biggest challenge is not actually what you can't control, because there's nothing that you can do about that, right? The biggest challenge is controlling yourself to actually show up every day and do something. And I said 3 years, but it was probably about 4 years since it was published. And it passed through lots of phases. Of course, that the pandemic helped because I stayed at home, right? And I had to write. But most of that, so I would say that 50% of that article was written at my place, but the other 50% was written in Costa Rica, in Plains, in Algesur, and that is a process that I love, and I love that. If I go with someone to those places, of course, that I cannot be a hermit and stay all day, but usually I try to balance, and I usually dedicate 1, maybe 2 hours maximum a day for the creative part when I am on vacation, and then have the rest of the time off. But I like that balance. I like that to create the conditions so that the muse influences you, let's say it. So 50% of that article was written on a daily basis. So maybe I'm on the plane, I want to write something. Maybe I am giving classes. Maybe we are giving classes, and now I have 1 hour off, and I can go just to, instead of giving the class. Sometimes Paulo is giving the class, and I'm just writing the article. So it was not a very disciplined method in the sense that it was always in the same place. But in my head, it's very disciplined. Yes, it's very disciplined, and I work. This is the way that I like to work. And the influence of the place where I am also makes a difference, because I'm very productive in the plane, very productive. I'm very productive if I work 2 hours while I am surfing, on like 2 hours surfing, 2 hours writing, and the rest of the day chilling. I'm extremely productive in that hour as well. So yes, it's not a simple process. So the biggest challenge is actually to keep, like you were saying, to keep connected to that, to keep the connection on a daily basis and know that you are into something, and just improving it and improving it and improving it. And it's sometimes, I remember that sometimes you write and it's amazing because it really comes out of you, like the artistic part, it comes out of you. And I love writing. But then you have to get references for what you are writing, right? It needs to make sense, and you need to get some reference for that, and you need to search articles and stuff like that. And that for me is not searching for the articles, but in order to write an article with like 50 references, and look, each of these articles, the editors made me reduce the articles to 50 references maximum. But most of them, they have above, each of those 3 parts, they have above 100 articles, each one. So we are talking about 300 articles that I've read, or some of them were classic, but I have certainly read over the last 3 to 4 years, only for this subject, I have certainly read about 150 articles. So there's a lot of discipline, and there's a lot of method over there. So yes, that's the biggest challenge. On the other hand, and going back to Steven Pressfield, and more recently to Rick Rubin, which is someone that I really admire as well. I think, and I think that you need to look at the magical side of this. And this is something that really fulfills me. And I love the approach that Rick Rubin is one of the best producers of music of all times. He produced the Beastie Boys, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, so many amazing articles. And he says this, he says, and I love the way that he places things, which is, I used to do albums and records to leave a legacy. I want to leave something behind, right? And I think that when you start to write, a big part of you wants that. Like a big part of your ego wants, okay, I've been connected with this. And there's always that part. There is always the ego. There is always the ego, right? And the ego comes, I think, in search of what happens when it's published. The soothing, right? The glory, the praise and stuff like that. But he says something that I think it's really, really important. I mean, it's not about, I think that what makes life beautiful in while we're talking about creativity is that he says that it's not about leaving a legacy. It's all an offering to God. And what I think that he means when he talks about that is that this is the way that you are. This is an expression of who you are to the biggest being ever, which is God. This is your contribution to life. This is your way of living. This is your own expression, and you do it because there's not any other way of. It's impossible not to do it because you have to do that because it's something that you feel that you have to offer, irrespectively if other people are going to like it or not. And I think that it's impossible to do something without placing yourself on the feet of others. I mean, if you are a complete freak, and if you live, I mean, if you don't need money and you just paint for a living, you can do whatever you want, right? But at the end of the day, art is to be shown and to have some impact on some other people. So I don't think that it's possible to do anything without thinking about the audience. I think it's a mistake. You have to always think about it. But I think that's not the most important part. I think that the biggest things come from a real and honest expression of who you are as a person. And I like that expression, it's all an offering to God. And this is, I think, in a sense, is the same thing that Stephen Pressfield says when he says that the difficult part is not to write, the difficult part is to sit down. And the difficult part is to make the conditions unique so that the muse can contact you, and through you, you can express yourself. And I find this beautiful because basically it's something like you are not doing this, you are just being a vehicle that whoever runs this place uses you to be an expression of life itself. And for me, that's something very magical and something that I really that I really like to absorb in the way that I create things or that I write articles. And for me, yes, for sure. And one of the things that I always liked, for example, was music. I think that if I didn't express my creativity to writing articles, I would probably do something related to music, like DJing or something like that, for sure. Because I can really feel that's something that it's the same energy that I would like to express myself. That's the way that I see it. Yeah.
It's nice because it's like a paradox. So you say it as it's your biggest challenge, but at the same time, it's what gives you the most adrenaline and the most satisfaction comes from that. Yeah. Okay. So I have two questions now about first of all, if this was a lonely process, or I know it was a teamwork, and we're going to get to that. But first of all, if you had any mentors or any colleague that guide you through the different stages, or someone that you usually go to, and you don't have to say who, but say, okay, maybe go this way or that way, or if it's a very lonely process, all that process that you described is very lonely, or you have people that you go to and that you ask for guidance, or that they give you guidance, even if not asked?
I never had for research. I never had mentors for writing articles. I never did. Um, I my biggest mentor is observation of other people's work, and try to bring myself to. Basically, I think you have to read good work. You have to read books. You have to read articles. You have to really understand what other people are writing and which is the environment that you are dealing with. And you have to be a very good observer, and understand what is missing there. Because it makes no point, especially in dentistry, especially in science, it makes no point to write the same things that other people have written, right? You need to bring something new to the table. So you need to be a very good observer of what's going on there. And you also, I think that you have to always think about what is the kind of article that I would love to read that would help me a lot. So it is a very lonely process, absolutely, yes. But but I don't specifically ask for help, but I am a very, very careful listener and a very careful observer in every lecture, in every book that I read, in every article, walking down the street, on social media, traveling, talking to other people. I'm a very observer. I think that I'm a very good observer of life, let's say it. And Rick Rubin also talks a lot about that. The best way to be creative is to look at what's around you. Go down the street, look at how this guy is dressed, look at her, look at how she's beautiful, look at how he is, look at that tree, look at that car. I think that absorbing all that is I think what inspires you. I think the world is the biggest inspiration. Yeah, and you need to be a good observer. So yes, in that sense, it was a very lonely process. Of course, that the way that I like to, especially when you are the main author, you need to lead the way. So what I usually do is that I write things, I write, and then I ask the people, so what do you think about that? And they just edit that, because I don't want to give them more work, right? I want to assume the responsibility of the work, and I want them to give me the feedback. Look, I like this, I don't like this, and then we go through. Because I want to make others people life easy. The people that work with me in this sense, I want to make their life easy, right? Especially because we are not going to be financially rewarded for this, right? It's not that we are like creating a patent. We are just sharing this. Of course, that when you give courses, you will indirectly have some benefits of that. But I want to make other people's life easy when I talk to them. So I try to give them what I believe they agree, and then they edit, they change, or they remove it. But yes, but it's mainly a lonely the way that I work in clinical research and narrative reviews. It's a very lonely process. Yes.
But it's very interesting, because what you said is that it's not only about dentistry. You integrate everything that you observe in the world, and that also is you can integrate that also in such a specific work as in a specific article as this one. So that's very interesting, because one might think that like focus and concentration and all that hard work for everything that you came up with these guidelines, it's all about the dental clinic. So you have to be in that environment, and you have to see as many patients as possible. And what you are saying is actually again quite look the other way. So get out and see other things, get inspired, feel like the zeitgeist, right? So what's going on in the world. And if you look carefully, you will see that all of that makes you can integrate in your work, and it can even influence your work. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's something I wish that I could explain you that, but I think there are some things in life that should remain at the magical realm, and that's exactly what I think. I think if you want the biggest proof that life is magic, you just think about these things, isn't it? I mean, it's there are some things that you just can't explain the influence, where you gotten that influence from, where did you exactly saw it? I'm sure that I saw something that inspired me to write something or to do a specific scheme or to think about this in a certain way. I'm sure that came I came up with that because of some sort of interaction that I had with the world. I just don't know where that was. It might have been in Latin America, it might have been in Asia, it might have been in India, but I think that one of the things that really made me enjoy this process so much is accepting there's a big part of this that belongs to the magical realm, and I think it makes everything much lighter. And sometimes you have to let go of the need that other people like what you are doing, right? Because you once you realize that you can eventually be a vehicle of the muse, let's say, to express things in a certain way, your responsibility lessens a little bit, right? So you don't take things so serious, and you accept if other people don't like it, and you don't make a big fuss out of that. And I think that you become more free in your own creative process. One of the biggest criticisms that I have in my work is that it's not very scientific. Sometimes it's written like in a very literary way, and it used to bother me that, and I said, well, no, I have to be more concise and more objective. But especially in this article over the last 3 or 4 years, I had a lot of contact, and especially over the last 10 years. I've traveled a lot, and I've read a lot about creativity and stuff like that. And I realized that I had in my mind something very clear. I'm gonna submit this to this one of these two biggest journals. If they get accepted, amazing. If they don't get accepted, I'm gonna publish this. I'm gonna give this for free online on an ebook, because this is what I think should be written, irrespectively of what other people think. If it gets accepted by a group of referees in a very well-known institution, that's amazing, of course, because the projection is huge, of course, right? But if that wasn't the case, it would not make me so happy, right? But it would still make it release, let's say it. And I like this word release, and I don't know if I sent you this. There's a guy called Derek Sivers, I think, that is a very close friend of Tim Ferriss. There's a very nice podcast. He says that he loves the word release, because when you release an album, when you release a book, when you release an article, you let that go and you open yourself to new stuff. And I love that notion because, for example, when people are praising now the C.A.R.E.S articles and asking me to send them the articles and making questions, my head is no longer there, right? I've released that. My head is on the next article that I'm writing. Like if you are like a music band, it happens the same. And I think that it happens a lot with musicians, which is, for example, I've been invited to do some conferences about the article, but while I am giving the conference about that subject, my head at that moment is thinking about something completely different. It's like a musician. You release an album, you go play it live. While you are playing it live, you are already working on the next album. So there's this dissociation. So releasing is a very good thing. So you've released that. It's over. You turn the page. Let's move on to some other stuff. And that is very interesting. I think that the notion that you just ended up this chapter, right? Because you placed your energy. Now it's time to let go and to go to the next moment, let's say, which is I think it's something that you have to also use in your life, right? You have some small cycles. even in the relationships at work, even the relationships that you have with your family. There are always cycles. The relationship, even with the same person, of course, always cycles. And the relationship with yourself, there's always cycles. And in your creativity, there's a cycle that you are doing this, and then you just turn the page and go, and you let go, and you go to something else. Just release that. And I find that that's very interesting also. And I think that's something that I've realized over the last years as well. Not only the magical component of the creative act, like say, but also that you just need to release what's inside of you and move on to the next step.
Okay, so before I ask you about the teamwork, and since you already talked about that, just to close this part, one of the things that I had written here, it was about, and you already said it, that because I know you love writing, I know you love to express yourself through writing and through your work. And my question was, and you already said it, but I'm going to ask you anyway, how much of this article is Jorge André? Were you able to express yourself in it and express your voice, or the scientific writing does not allow that? Or is still Jorge André and his essay?
Well, if I wrote a book that was fiction, it would be completely different. I mean, I think that the question could be, don't get me wrong by trying to reformulate of your. Did I felt that my goals while writing this were in any way limited, or did I felt that my writing was corrected by the editors? No, I would say no. I would say that 95% of what I wanted to express, the way that I wanted to express it, and the way that I wanted to tell this story, was told. 95%. Yeah.
But that's huge.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes, but it is. But I like to tell stories. I like to take the reader on a journey. Okay, like a journey. So this is this, and especially I like to always make them connections. Always make them think about connections that can relate to their daily work, to hook them, let's say it. So basically, I'm just inviting people to come along on a journey with me and show them, what, do you see this? So it makes sense, right? It happens to you as well. Yes, it does. So I think that if you think about this and this and that way, I think it makes sense. And also, I think that in a certain way, there was also a little bit of luck or magic, whatever you may say it, because one thing that I didn't realize, and some people tell me that, is that how we were able to maintain a story that was logical from the first to the final act, that was always following the same thought process, that was coherent, and it had an initial, it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yes, and that thing, I'm extremely happy with that. Yes.
Okay, and because it's in the line, so tell me a little bit more about the revision. You already said that you need to have a thick skin for it, but you also said it that your article is much better after that revision.
Yes.
Was it a long process? Was it something that was challenging and that you were surprised by?
It's nerve-wracking, you know. I was talking to some editors recently, and they said that most of the articles, they are rejected not because of the content, but just because they don't respect the guidelines in terms of format, in terms of what you should include or what you should not include, in terms of the style of writing, in terms of the style of the reference. I mean, things that if you just stay focused on what they ask, it's just easy to do. And they said that it says that 90% of the rejected articles are because of that. 10% are because of the content is not good enough, let's say. The process can be nerve-wracking. And I've had over the last 10 years, a few articles that got rejected. I had one article that I completely gave up. And it can be nerve-wracking. It can be really nerve-wracking because, for example, in these three articles, we had two editors that were basically being the referee, and then you had actually the reviewers, and it were 6 reviewers, 2 reviewers per article. From the 6 reviewers, all of the 5 of them accepted the article. One of them was completely crushed me, said that my clinical cases did not have quality to be in that journal, for example. And you have to be thick-skinned. And sometimes the guy that said that is actually a guy that was writing something on the same subject. Do you understand? And then I am just elaborating on this. I don't know. I'm just making this up. It might not be that, but it might also be. If you eventually find a reviewer that realizes that your article is actually in that subject better and has a higher quality, and it is more complex and more comprehensive and much deeper than what he is writing, then you have an interest of conflict. You have a problem here, right? And this happens a lot in the reviewing process. So you have to have thick skin. So how can you minimize this? By writing some very, very good things. By writing some very, very good things, and by creating some very, very good cases. You have to be so good that it's impossible to ignore you, basically. You have to be so good that they cannot ignore you. That you cannot be in this sort of level, you cannot be average. You need to make sure that you need to create a wow. Where does this guy came up with this? How is it possible to have 3 full articles so well documented and all the thought process? You read every line, you read everything. There's references for everything. This makes sense. This is completely and this is controversial, but he explains it very well. He's very careful by the way that he says. It seems like it is not always. It's not always absolute. It's always because when you are writing things, sometimes when you say a sentence that is not clearly supported by the literature, you cannot say that one thing is like A equals B. It seems like A equals B. I mean, and you have to be careful in every word that you write, in every sentence that you make, and the style that you make, because you on the other side there will be some people that can be really, really difficult to analyze your work, and they can be very, very mean sometimes. Sometimes they have their. Sometimes it's perfectly legitimate what they say. Some of the times it's not. Some of the times it's subjective. Some referees you can see that they really want to improve your work. Some other referees you can clearly see that they really want to sabotage your publication. That's all anonymous. That happens, right? But yes, you need to be really confident in what you are writing, and you need to make your homework, because they can really, really crush your ego if you are not really on top of the game yet.
Okay, so let's talk about teamwork. So because this was a result, and you already said it, of teamwork. How do you coordinate a team for this?
So basically, in this case, I had the idea of the article, so I just usually when I talk to the team, I always have a draft of everything. And just send an email to guys and say, look, I send an email to all the co-authors. Look, I'm writing this. It's going to be about this, and that, and this is a draft. I would like you to be the co-author, the co-authors. And I already laid out the hierarchy of the co-authors. Okay, so I don't want again. I don't want drama. I want to be the first co-author. I just already send them with everything pretty much pretty much decide in terms of which author participates in which part, and the draft, like a well advanced draft. So when I present them the work, I want them to show them that this is something real. I don't like ideas, I like execution much more than ideas. So when they realize, now this guy is not playing around, this is actually, that's something that's going to happen. Something is going to happen from here, because this is already in an advanced stage, right? I would say like an advanced draft. And then I invite them, and then they can edit, they read it and they can edit, and they just give suggestions and stuff like that. Yes, and sometimes I tell, look, I would need from you a case like this. I would say that 90% of the cases in those articles in that magazine, 90% of the cases are mine, 10% are not mine. And sometimes I say, look, I say to a co-author, look, I think that it should be a co-author, because I think you have some very nice cases of this specific technique. So come over and let's present your case here. Some others, I think that they have very in-depth knowledge of a given subject, so they come and they just edit a text. But I like to present the stage in the situation in a very advanced stage, to make their life easy. I don't like to complicate their life, because I know it can be very time consuming, right? But yeah, I like to already talk to the team when I'm well. I don't like to talk about ideas. I think it's awful to talk about ideas, and it always gives you an impression that you have made something that you have not made. So I think it's always better to bootstrap things, which is just try to do something as soon as possible and try to create something, and then go from there, and then to ask other people about that.
Okay, two last questions. First, what have you learned in all this process? Because I thought it was 3 years. Now you told me that it was more than that, 4 years. The two parts of the article are out. What have you learned in all of
I've
this?
learned that the best things in life take time. The best things in life take time and take commitment, when you feel like you want to do it and when you don't feel like you want to do it. And I think that's for everything in life, even for relationships. I think that the best things in relationships take time. Yeah. And I think it's something that I really learned with this process regarding this article, is that things do take time. Some of the articles are easier to do, but this was like a very ambitious project, and it needed to be done with time, with patience. It needed to be thoughtful. It needed to be done with time. And I think that if you give proper time and proper thought on a specific project that you have, it may eventually be a relationship. If you give that, I think at the end you will have a much better result. Yeah, a much more solid, much more, basically a much more significant result. And I think this article is actually a result of that. And I think honestly, you never know how well received an article is going to be. It's been very good so far. But whatever happens, I am 100% sure that what we wrote there is something that for years to come people will read, and it will clarify a lot of decisions. And of course, that being useful is very important, and being useful is more important than actually your ego of leaving a legacy and the success. But it needs to be a natural expression of who you are, with discipline, of course, with discipline, because anything in life, even creativity, needs discipline. And the best artists in the world were not artists that had this insight while they were like having a coffee or something. They really worked hard, and they really dominated their craft, and they spent hours and hours and hours in the studio uh, sharpening their craft. And I think that it's very important that you create conditions for the muse to use you, and the conditions are created through discipline. Like sitting down to write is more important than the writing itself. Yeah.
And did you enjoy the journey?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course I did. I really enjoyed writing this. I really did. It was very, very good. It was probably one of the articles that gave me the biggest joy of writing, because it was such a daunting task to write this, and there were so many things. The complexity was so huge. I had it clear in my head, but the work ahead was so huge, so complex. There was so many things that I had to write down, so many things that I had to deal with, so many diagrams that I had to redo and do. Like, each diagram in the article was redone at least 20 times. There's like 20 versions of each diagram. It was really something that, but I had a lot of fun doing that, because when you, like I was saying, when you give proper time and commitment to something, the results are always going to be better, right?
Okay. I had a question, but I don't know if you have if this makes sense. But I have it in my mind. I'm going to make it anyway, because I mean we've been in touch for the last almost 2 years. So you've been
Yeah.
talking about this article, and now it's out. And I remember you talking, okay, it's out. And you said it already during this conversation. The releasing. So the
Yeah.
releasing. Okay, it's there. It's kind of the let go of it. So,
Yes.
but anyway, it's a living organism. So now it's started. It's out there, and it's serving the dentistry community. I would like to know how you see it. Because
Yes, it's a very good question.
I mean, it's out there, and I completely
Yeah.
understand the releasing and the let go of it, because it was a lot of work. And you said that you gave it a lot of yourself. You enjoyed the journey. You learned a lot, but also now it's there, and it's going to have an impact on your life also. So how do you see that? How what Because I know what this is. We're going just theoretically, it's hypothetically, and we don't know what's
Yeah.
expecting you. But how do you, now that it's out, how do you start seeing the impact that this is going to have on your life?
I think it's very likely that this article is going to have a much more significant impact on my professional life than the previous ones, because it's impossible to ignore it in the magazine that it's published, and how daring the complexity and the subject that it is. It's impossible to ignore it. So yes, it's going to have a very significant impact on my professional lives in terms of credibility when we talk about that article, in terms of maybe invitations to talk in congresses and stuff like that. Those are the basically two things in terms of credibility, in terms of invitations eventually. But I think that the most important one that I see is because I think that in terms of professional recognition, I think that I've had enough, and I'm okay with that. I don't think that there are. For example, I was invited to lecture on the European Academy of Aesthetic Dentistry that's going to be here in Portugal, and it's probably one of the best stages in the world, and that happened even before the article. And for example, that makes me nervous, of course. So in a way, I don't think that there is a stage of dentistry of a congress that would make me a more fulfilled person, because I think that the process of getting there is more important um, than the actually than the act itself. So yes, recognition in terms of recognition is one thing. The other thing is invitations, but I think that the most important thing is I think that the things that actually give me the most joy is private messages of people that say, "Look, I read your article and I think it's amazing. oh, can you just send me your article? And I always say, look, also give me feedback, because I love to hear personal feedback, because that's actually where the truth is on a one-to-one basis. And I love it when they say, look, I've read your article, it's amazing. I think it's so well written. I love it. It helped me a lot. And I think that is what makes me happier. The the personal recognition and the private messages, or someone. Even, I don't know if I told you that, but I was in a congress in last year at Sindicato dos Médicos Dentistas. I was in their congress with Teresa Pinho, and I was coming out, and there was a guy from Estarreja, 20 kilometers south of Espinho, and he said to me, look, and he was basically there. That some people were talking to me, and he was there staring, and then I just was about to go to my car, and he approached me and said, look, I just wanted to tell you, I just wanted to thank you and Manuela, for the podcast. And it's making a very important impact in my life and in my practice, and I would like to thank you about that. And I think that, for me, is the most important feedback that you can ever have. I don't know if I told you that. It was he says, I listen every single podcast that you do, and I have to tell that it makes a big difference, and I would like to let you know that it's been very important for me. And because I don't think that we all have a positive impact in every people, or in all the audience, because it's impossible. Some people, you connect sometimes with one type of person than with the other. But I think that if you get this connection, it means that you are genuinely making someone. It's not that you are responsible for their success, because that's a very egotistic way of looking at things. But it means that that person is creating another view of the world because of the way that you've presented things to them. And I think that is really something that is much more important than the recognition or the stages, because all that recognition, all the stages, when that happens, no one cares about that, right? And when you die, you're not going to be around to, like Rick Rubin says. So even the legacy, it makes no sense, because it's not about leaving a legacy, because you're not going to be around, right? And when you die, no one will actually give a fuck most of the time. You'll be completely forgotten, right? So I think the most important thing is that you express yourself and you can genuinely connect with other people. And I think that is where the magic happens. Yeah.
Okay, last. So if someone is listening and it has the same desire as you did when you started to write research articles, and you've done it, but if someone is listening and wants to do the same, what's your best? What would you advise?
It's very simple. Go and read every single thing that is on that specific topic that you want to write about. Read everything. Get inspirations from people who wrote something about it. And then see if there is something missing there, that there is a point of view that someone missed, or there is something that you genuinely feel that you can actually make a difference there. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be actually a new angle of photography. It can be a new technique of whatever. But whatever because I think this is usually something that you feel. You feel that you have something that needs to be shown. And that's a feeling that you have. That's not something that you search for, like marketers do when they do split tests. It's something that you feel that you need to share. So go and read everything that has been written before in that specific topic. And that for sure is the best way to start. Yeah.
Okay. André, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I know that I pushed you a little bit, and I know that when I start talking about this, I completely understood that you were tired because it was just coming out, and
it's not only I deal and I understand. And one of the things that I realize, I don't deal with praising my work. I don't deal with the praising part very well, honestly. I don't. Sometimes I have the tendency, and my mother says that to me a lot. So I don't. She's always telling me, oh, you don't see your own value. I mean, it's your mother talking, right? Of course that she loves you and she's biased, right? But I think that she's true in a sense that sometimes I don't think about, and sometimes I don't stop and think and give myself the proper recognition that sometimes I would deserve. And that in that sense, yes. But on the other way, I think that also can be a trap, because if you are too much attached to the glory, I think you lose the moment, right? And you lose what the good things, which is talking to people on a more informal basis and actually trying to teach on a very simple way, which is just two people talking and sharing experiences. If you place yourself too up there, I think you lose that connection and you lose the fun of it. Um, but yeah, but thank you for insisting on doing this, because I think that
And also,
that is
like you were saying, is about we never know who's listening, and I think it's very
yeah
important to show the process and to show
yeah.
how it's done, and to show also a little bit about the backstage of the process. You talked a lot about
Yeah,
your journey, the
but it
challenges.
also it doesn't need to be an article. It can be an
Yeah,
Instagram page. It can be a blog. It can be a podcast. It can be videos, marketing videos for your patients. Just add something that you feel is an expression of who you are. Don't only leave those things to the marketeers. That's what I think. And we've had, for example, constant circle, right? The and it was very interesting what they were telling us, that as marketers, you want to avoid what most marketers do, which is doing the same techniques and applying the same rules for every sort of marketing of dental practices. I mean, when you have a practice, it needs to be, in my point of view, also an expression of who you are. So even the posts that you do on social media, just try to be as creative as possible. And for that, you need to be exposed to a lot of what other people are doing. You need to travel. You need to go to museums. You need to see art. You need to take photos. You need to talk to people. You need to observe life. And so it doesn't need to be an article. It needs to be whatever makes whenever you think that you have something worth showing, it's worth showing. Yeah.
yeah, and that was the reason why I insisted on you on doing this, because I think you really practice what you just said. You're a perfect example of that,
I
and
try to. Yes, I
I
try to.
think that you bring a lot of yourself to your work and the way that you express yourself, and I think that for people to know the personal process of making this research article that is so
Have you read it? Have you read
detailed
it?
and complex. And I read the first one, not the
All
part two.
right.
The
I'm going to
part
say the
one, I
part
read it.
two. You love the diagrams on the part two. They are very nice.
But I think that for you to be able, and this has nothing to do with praise. I think it's about sharing
Yeah.
the personal
Yes.
journey. So,
Yeah.
and that's why I said in the beginning, okay, we're not going to talk about the technical part here, because and I'm sure you'll be a wonderful guest in other podcasts, in other dentistry podcasts, to talk about the technical part
No,
of
no,
this.
no,
But
no,
that's
no.
not what I wanted. I wanted for you to give this the personal process of it, because I think and since the beginning. You said that since the beginning is this expression of yourself that you bring to everything that you do, and specifically this in writing and research. And again, that's what we tried also to bring in this podcast, to bring this
No,
human
and
part of
yeah,
dentistry.
and I think that for example, this podcast has had a huge impact on the way that I lead my team. Huge impact, honestly, because because it's also an expression of creativity of you and I, right? Because we express ourselves here, and it has been this is one of those products that really changed me in the way that I lead my the way that I interact with the teams that I am involved, for the better, because you get more thoughtful about what you should be doing and what you should be saying. And when you talk out loud to an audience, it really makes you think what is reasonable, what is the best for the well-being of not only you, but for what makes sense for the community, for your own for your own stability, of course, but also for the people that are around you. And I think that I am much more aware of my mistakes, and I think that I am much more thoughtful leader, let's say, because of this podcast as well, because of the guests and everything. Yeah. So and this is also an example of creativity.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I think that I mean, to bring the human side of the. Because I think in dentistry we talk a lot about the human side when we talk about patients and patients' emotions, but to bring the human side of the technician, right? Because it's like dentists are only seen as technicians, and to bring the personal journey and the human side, I think, and that's what we want also to in this podcast, and to show that dentistry has so much to gain if we bring and if we can incorporate everything that is around the world that you just said that you do. And that's I once let me just say this. I once saw someone calling you a trendsetter, and I think that's what you also, that's what you
Who was that? If you don't want to share, don't share it.
No, I have no problem sharing it because he said it in a public place. It was Antonio Roma Torres.
I am a trend setter.
Yeah, that you're a trendsetter. And I think that you do that because you are very observer of the world, just like you said. And you can detect the small
nuances, very soon,
and then you integrate it in dentistry, because you can only do that if if you get out of the
you have to train your awareness, your sensitivity in a good way. Your awareness, you have to be aware.
So I think that this, by talking about this and by showing how a little bit of how you do this, because like you said, then there's a lot of thing that is magic, and there's a lot of part of it that you cannot explain. But I think that by you showing how you do it and how you integrate and how you bring the perspective, I think that for the ones listening, I think it brings so much richness to dentistry.
You have to dance. I think that you have to dance in between all these things that involve dentistry, like dealing with your team, or writing articles, or marketing your practice, or dealing with your finances, or dealing with the emotional part of the team. It's just such a complex profession to live in, and I think it's very important for you not to lose the creative part of yourself, and to express that in the way that you believe makes sense. But it's a lot of work, of course. Anything in life, meditation, it's a lot of work in the beginning, right? You have to mindfulness. You have to bring yourself to the moment. You have to keep bringing. Nothing is like easy. Meditation and mindfulness, it's not relaxation, right? It's just have to be in the moment. There's a lot of work that you need to do.
Okay, thank you. But I interrupted you. You were saying something, and I completely cutted you. Okay, no. Okay, so thank you so much, Andrés. Again, thank you for opening and sharing yourself here for the podcast and for the ones listening, and again reminding our listeners and viewers to go to softbites.online and check our conscious dentistry course. Not only we give you the part of the mindset, but also of the protocols in order for you to thrive in your dentistry practice. But also you will have a lot of it's 3 days where we talked about all of how can you integrate all of this in your dentistry practice. And the very nice part of the course is all the networking and brainstorming that we do. So
in the lovely setting of Sagres.
Yeah, with the beautiful scenario in the south of Portugal. So go to softbites.online and check the course out and come and meet us in Portugal.
Yes.
We'll love to meet you. So thank you, André, and see you.
Thank you, Manuela.
See you next time.
Bye-bye. See you next time.
Bye.